Blood stained the marble floors the night Matteo Lombardi banished the only woman who had ever truly seen his soul. "Take nothing of mine," the ruthless boss commanded, stripping her of everything she owned. Matteo believed he was carrying out the perfect revenge. He had no idea that Hazel already carried the one thing he could never survive losing. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Lombardi estate, mirroring the violent storm building inside the grand foyer. Hazel Brooks stood frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Hazel was a large woman, proudly fat, with generous curves she had spent a lifetime learning to love, and soft, wide hips that Matteo used to pull himself against in the dark, desperate hours of the night. Her weight had always made Hazel feel grounded, unshakable. But standing before the boss of the Chicago syndicate tonight, she felt as fragile as spun glass. Matteo Lombardi stood by the grand staircase, his usually immaculate tailored suit ruined by the blood of Hazel's brother. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and his piercing, icy gray eyes that always softened when they moved over Hazel's thick thighs and full stomach, were now empty of any human warmth. In this moment, Matteo was the devil incarnate, a predator who had just found a rat inside his own sanctuary. "You knew," Matteo said, his voice dangerously low, vibrating with a lethal edge that made the armed guards in the room go still. "Matteo, please." "I didn't," Hazel begged, her voice cracking. She stepped forward, the heavy silk of her designer gown, a gift from him, meant to drape elegantly over her plus-size figure, rustling in the suffocating silence. "Caleb is an idiot. He's an addict. I had no idea he was skimming from your shipments. If I had known, I would have stopped him. I would have come to you." "You expect me to believe that?" Matteo sneered, closing the distance between them with slow, predatory steps. "Your brother steals $500,000 of my product and tries to sell it to the Russian syndicate. And you, the woman who sleeps in my bed, the woman I trusted over my own captains, knew nothing?" "It's the truth." Tears spilled down Hazel's flushed cheeks. She reached out, her plump, shaking fingers brushing his solid chest, desperate to reach the man who had whispered reverent praise against her skin only the night before. Matteo flinched at her touch as if she had burned him. He grabbed her wrist, his grip bruising. For 6 months, Matteo and Hazel had lived in a secret world. To the estate, Hazel was just the head chef, the woman whose culinary genius kept the Lombardi Empire fed. But behind closed doors, she was his obsession. Matteo had worshipped her body, treating her stretch marks like scripture and her softness like the only peace he had ever known in his violent life. Now that same man looked at her as if she were dirt beneath his expensive leather shoes. "Your brother dies tonight," Matteo said, his voice empty of emotion. Hazel gasped and dropped to her knees, the impact sending a painful jolt through her heavy frame. She didn't care. "No, Matteo, I'm begging you. Punish him. Break his legs. Banish him. But don't kill him. He's the only family I have left. Please, for what we mean to each other, spare him." A cruel, twisted smile touched Matteo's lips. "What we mean to each other? You were a distraction, Hazel. A soft place to land. Did you really think you meant more to me than my empire? My respect?" He released her wrist and stepped back, disgusted. "Tobias," he barked to his lieutenant standing in the shadows. "Take Caleb to the docks. Make it slow." "No!" Hazel screamed, scrambling forward, but 2 of Matteo's men seized her arms and hauled her heavy frame backward. Matteo watched her struggle, his jaw clenched tight. The betrayal cut deeper than he would ever admit. He had let this woman see his vulnerabilities. He had bought her diamonds and draped her in silks that celebrated her beautiful, unapologetic size, and she had repaid him by conspiring with her junkie brother. Or so his twisted, paranoid mind believed. "Throw her out," Matteo ordered, turning his back on her. "Matteo, wait, please," Hazel sobbed, still fighting the guards. Matteo paused and glanced over his shoulder. His eyes raked over the diamond necklace resting against her collarbone, the expensive silk dress, the ruby ring on her finger. "Actually, wait." He walked back to her, his expression turning to stone. "Take it off." Hazel blinked through her tears, confused. What? The jewelry. The dress. Everything I paid for. Take nothing of mine, Matteo commanded, his voice echoing through the cavernous hall. You leave this house with exactly what you brought into it. Nothing. The humiliation hit Hazel harder than any physical blow. Surrounded by Matteo's men, she was forced to strip off the diamonds. She was marched to the servants' quarters, where she changed into the faded, stretched-out sweatpants and oversized t-shirt she had worn on her very first day of work. She left behind the designer coats, the imported shoes, the credit cards. As she was shoved out through the heavy iron gates into the freezing Chicago rain, Hazel wrapped her arms around her thick waist, shivering uncontrollably. The cold seeped into her bones, but it was nothing compared to the ice forming in her heart. She placed a trembling hand over her lower belly. Just that morning, Hazel had taken a test. 2 pink lines. She had spent the whole day trying to figure out how to tell the most dangerous man in the city that he was going to be a father. She had pictured his rough hands resting gently on her full stomach, his promises to protect them. Now, standing in the torrential downpour with absolutely nothing to her name, Hazel made a vow. Matteo had told her to take nothing of his. He was wrong. She was taking the only thing that truly mattered, and she would make damn sure Matteo Lombardi never found out about the life growing inside her. 5 years later, the bell above the door of Sweet Crumb Bakery chimed, cutting through the warm, vanilla-scented air. Hazel wiped her flour-dusted hands on her apron and blew a stray strand of hair out of her face. At 28, she had grown even more at home in her own skin. Her body was lush, strong, and deeply maternal, carrying the physical evidence of her hard work and her overwhelming love for her son. Be right with you, Hazel called from behind the display case, arranging a fresh tray of blueberry scones. Portland, Maine, felt a lifetime away from the bloody streets of Chicago. Here, she wasn't the disgraced lover of a mafia kingpin. She was just Hazel, the cheerful, plus-size baker who made the best cinnamon rolls in the county. It had been a brutal climb. She had scrubbed floors, worked triple shifts in diners, and saved every penny while her ankles swelled and her back ached through pregnancy. But it was all worth it when she looked toward the back corner of the bakery. Sitting at a small wooden table, swinging his short legs, was 4-year-old Leo. He was frowning deeply at a coloring book, a dark, intense scowl on his small face that made Hazel's breath catch every single time she saw it. Leo had Hazel's soft, curly brown hair and her dimpled cheeks. But his eyes were the exact icy, piercing gray of the devil she had left behind. Even the way the boy concentrated, his jaw locked in stubborn determination, was a haunting echo of Matteo Lombardi. "Mommy, the green crayon is broken," Leo announced, his voice demanding but sweet. "Use the blue one, my little bear. Trees can be blue if you want them to be." Hazel smiled warmly and walked over to press a kiss to his forehead. As she headed back to the counter, she finally looked at her customer, a tall man in a dark, expensive overcoat, staring at her. Hazel's blood ran instantly cold. The warmth of the bakery vanished, replaced by the phantom chill of a Chicago storm. It was Tobias. Matteo's right-hand man stood perfectly still, his eyes wide as they darted from Hazel's face down to her flour-covered apron, then slowly toward the corner of the room. Hazel shifted her large body, deliberately blocking Tobias's line of sight to Leo, her maternal instincts flaring like a lioness protecting her cub. "Hazel," Tobias whispered, genuinely shocked. He had been sent to Portland to launder money through a real estate developer. Stopping in for coffee had been a completely random twist of fate. "We thought you were dead." "After what he did to my brother?" Hazel cut in, her voice steady despite the violent trembling of her hands. "What do you want, Tobias?" She stood tall, using her broad shoulders and wide frame to shield her son. "I have nothing to do with that life anymore. I live quietly. I bother no one." Tobias stepped closer to the counter. "The boss, Matteo, hasn't been the same since you left. He's unhinged. He wiped out the Russians, the Irish. He's burned this whole city down looking for a ghost. He told me to leave," Hazel snapped, her eyes narrowing. He made his choice the night he murdered my brother and threw me out into the rain. Tell him nothing, Tobias. If you ever had an ounce of respect for me, you'll walk out that door and forget you ever saw me. Mommy, look, a blue tree. Leo suddenly hopped off his chair and ran up to Hazel, tugging at her apron. Hazel's heart stopped. She tried to push him behind her legs, but it was too late. Tobias looked down. The hardened mafia lieutenant froze completely, staring into the 4-year-old boy's face, staring directly into the unmistakable, chilling gray eyes of his boss. The resemblance wasn't just close. It was undeniable. The boy was a miniature Matteo Lombardi. Tobias swallowed hard and stepped back, looking at Hazel with a complicated mix of terror and pity. Hazel. What have you done? Leave. Hazel growled, grabbing a heavy cast-iron rolling pin from beneath the counter. Get out of my shop. Tobias didn't say another word. He turned and rushed out into the cold morning air, the bell jingling cheerfully behind him, a sickening contrast to the dread sinking into Hazel's stomach. She dropped the rolling pin, scooped Leo into her arms, and buried her face in his neck, breathing in his sweet, childish scent. They had to run. They had to pack everything, tonight. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles away in a dark, smoke-filled office in Chicago, Matteo Lombardi sat behind his mahogany desk, swirling amber liquid in a crystal glass. The empire was his. Every enemy was dead. And yet victory tasted like ash. He was a hollow shell, haunted by the memory of soft curves, warm laughter, and a betrayal that still bled fresh every night. His phone buzzed on the desk. A text from Tobias. Matteo picked it up, his eyes half closed with exhaustion. But as the image loaded, his heart physically stopped in his chest. It was a blurry photo, snapped hastily through a bakery window from across the street. It showed a large, beautiful woman with curly brown hair, holding a little boy. Matteo zoomed in on the boy's face. The phone slipped from his fingers, shattering the crystal glass on the desk. He didn't notice the whiskey soaking his paperwork. He didn't feel the glass slicing his hand. Those were his eyes staring back at him. Giovanni. Matteo's voice tore through the silent office, a guttural roar from a wounded beast waking after a 5-year sleep. Get the jet ready. Now. We're going to Maine. Panic consumed Hazel as she tore through the small, dimly lit apartment above her bakery. Adrenaline masked the heavy ache in her lower back as she hauled a massive canvas duffel bag onto her unmade mattress. Her large, capable hands shook violently as she shoved Leo's tiny winter coats, her own thick woolen sweaters, and a worn envelope holding exactly $12,000 in emergency cash into the bag. She had spent 5 years preparing for this exact nightmare. She had even paid a local Portland fixer, a quiet, paranoid man named Arthur Higgins, who worked out of a rusted trailer park in Cape Elizabeth, to build them completely backstop new identities. Mommy, why are we packing my dinosaur toys? Leo asked, small hands clutching a plastic T-Rex, standing in the bedroom doorway. His dark brows knit together in a scowl that made Hazel's chest physically ache. It was a terrifying mirror of the mafia boss who was undoubtedly already hunting them. We're going on a surprise vacation, my sweet bear, Hazel lied, forcing a wide, reassuring smile that never reached her terrified eyes. She walked over, her soft, full hips swaying, and knelt in front of him, pulling his small, sturdy body against her chest. We're going to see the snow in Canada. Won't that be fun? Leo nodded slowly, though his sharp, calculating gray eyes that held far too much awareness for a 4-year-old, studied her trembling lips. Downstairs, the heavy deadbolt on the bakery's back door shattered with a deafening crack. Hazel gasped, snatching Leo into her arms with a sudden, fierce burst of maternal strength. She backed into the far corner of the bedroom, her heart slamming against her ribs. Heavy, deliberate footsteps echoed on the wooden staircase, each thud landing like a coffin nail. She looked around frantically for a weapon, her gaze landing on a heavy brass lamp. She set Leo down behind her, shielding him completely with her own body, grabbed the lamp, and raised it high. The bedroom door didn't open. It was kicked clean off its hinges, splintered wood crashing onto the cheap linoleum floor. Matteo Lombardi stood in the doorway, filling every inch of the room. He wore a bespoke charcoal overcoat, his broad shoulders blocking out the dim hallway light. The brutal Chicago winter seemed to still cling to him, radiating a chilling, lethal presence. His dark hair was slightly disheveled from the private flight out of O'Hare, but it was his face that made Hazel's blood freeze. He looked older, harsher. Deep lines framed his cruel mouth, and his eyes were hollow, feral, desperate. For a long, suffocating moment, the undisputed king of the Chicago underworld simply stared at her. His gaze dragged hungrily over her body. She was heavier now, her curves even more pronounced, her waist thick and soft, her breasts full beneath her worn flannel shirt. To Matteo, she looked like a goddess rising from the ashes of his ruined life. The sheer, overwhelming relief of seeing her breathing, alive, standing right in front of him, nearly brought the ruthless killer to his knees. "Hazel," Matteo breathed, his voice a raspy, broken whisper. He took a slow step forward, his hands twitching at his sides as if he wanted to pull her into his chest, bury his face in her soft neck, and breathe in the vanilla and sugar scent that had haunted his nightmares for 5 agonizing years. "Don't take another step, Matteo," Hazel warned, her voice trembling but loud. She gripped the brass lamp tighter, her knuckles turning white. "I will crack your skull open. I swear to God, I will do it." Matteo stopped, his eyes flashing with a mix of pain and dark amusement. "You always were fierce," he murmured. "Put the lamp down, Hazel. I'm not here to hurt you. I came to bring you home." "Home?" Hazel let out a bitter, half-hysterical laugh. "You threw me out into a thunderstorm, Matteo. You stripped the clothes off my back and told me to take nothing of yours." She gestured wildly at the tiny, cramped apartment. "This is my home. You have no say here." Before Matteo could issue another command, a small figure peeked out from behind Hazel's thick thigh. The air in the room shattered into a million jagged pieces. Matteo stopped breathing entirely. His icy gray eyes locked onto the 4-year-old boy. Leo stared back, completely unfazed by the giant, intimidating stranger, crossing his small arms over his chest in a defiant stance that was entirely Lombardi. "Who are you?" Leo demanded, his high-pitched voice ringing through the silent room. Matteo's mouth fell open slightly. The ruthless mafia boss, a man who had ordered the executions of dozens of men without blinking, felt a hot, blinding tear slip down his cheek. He sank slowly to his knees on the ruined floor, ignoring the splinters piercing his expensive trousers. He studied the boy's dark hair, his stubborn jaw, his gray eyes. It was like looking at a ghost of himself, untouched by blood and sin. Matteo choked on the word, his hands trembling as he reached toward the empty space between them. "I am your father. Don't you dare!" Hazel screamed, dropping the lamp and falling to her knees to shield Leo from his view. "He is not yours. You lost the right to him the night you murdered my brother and threw me away. You don't get to claim him now." Matteo's head snapped up, his eyes hardening into flint. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by the lethal predator Hazel had once fallen in love with. "He is my blood," Matteo growled, his voice vibrating with absolute authority. "And I am taking both of you back to Chicago tonight. You can fight me, Hazel, but you will lose." "I would rather die," she spat, wrapping her arms tightly around her son. "That can be arranged for everyone else in this city." A new, cold voice echoed from the bottom of the staircase. Matteo froze. He instantly recognized the heavy metallic click of an automatic weapon chambering around. It wasn't one of his men. In his desperate, blind rush to reach Maine, he had broken his own security protocols. He had flown out of Chicago without a full guard, running on pure, frantic emotion. And his enemies had followed him. Footsteps thundered up the wooden stairs, heavy, calculated, terrifyingly fast. Matteo's instincts, sharpened by decades of survival in the brutal mafia underworld, took over instantly. He lunged forward, grabbing Hazel by her thick hips and throwing his full body weight against her, shoving her and Leo into the small master bathroom just as a spray of bullets tore through the drywall. The deafening roar of automatic gunfire shredded the apartment. Plaster exploded in a cloud of white dust, burying the packed duffel bag and shattering the bedroom window.
Stay down!
Mateo roared over the gunfire, pinning Hazel and a screaming Leo against the cold porcelain of the bathtub. He drew a heavy, matte black Glock 19 from his shoulder holster, his eyes burning with a lethal, demonic fury.
Who is that?
Hazel shrieked, covering Leo's ears with her white hands, her own body shielding her trembling son. The Moretti Syndicate, Mateo grunted, risking a glance around the shattered doorframe. They must have tracked the tail number on my jet. They've been waiting for me to slip up and leave my compound unprotected.
You brought a war into my home.
Hazel cried, tears of pure terror streaming down her face. All her hard work, her safety, her entire quiet life in Portland was being shot to pieces right in front of her.
Mateo didn't answer.
He leaned out of the bathroom and fired 3 rapid, precise shots into the hallway.
A heavy thud and a gargled scream confirmed one hitman had gone down.
But there were more.
2 men stepped into the destroyed bedroom, weapons raised. Mateo, look out!
Hazel screamed. Mateo spun, firing, but a bullet caught him in the left shoulder. The impact threw him backward into the bathroom wall, blood instantly blooming across his charcoal coat. He gritted his teeth against a groan of agony and fired twice more with his good arm. The 2 hitmen collapsed onto the ruined floor, dead before they hit the ground. Silence, thick and suffocating, fell over the apartment, broken only by the wail of police sirens in the distance and Leo's soft, terrified sobs. Mateo slumped against the bathroom doorframe, his breathing shallow, clutching his bleeding shoulder. He looked down at Hazel, his gray eyes softening as he saw that she and his son were completely unharmed.
Did they hit you?
Mateo choked out, sliding down the wall until he sat on the floor, his face pale. Hazel stared at the blood pouring from his shoulder, her anger warring with the deep, buried love she still carried for this man. Cursing under her breath, she grabbed a thick white towel from the rack and pressed it hard against his wound. Mateo hissed in pain but leaned into her touch, his head falling against her soft, heavy chest. "You're an idiot," she sobbed, pressing the towel harder. "You came here to ruin my life again, and now you're going to bleed to death on my bathroom floor." "I didn't kill him," Mateo whispered, his voice fading. He reached up with a bloodstained hand and gently cupped her tear-streaked cheek, his thumb brushing her skin. Hazel froze.
What?
Your brother.
Mateo coughed, wincing.
Caleb. I didn't kill him, Hazel. I told you I did because my pride was wounded, because you'd lied to me.
But I couldn't put a bullet in the only family you had left.
I had Tobias smuggle him out of Chicago. He's been living in Switzerland, at the Paracelsus Recovery Clinic. I've paid for his rehab for 5 years. Hazel's breath hitched, her wide eyes searching his face for a lie. She found none. The crushing weight of grief she had carried for half a decade cracked open, letting in a blinding rush of shock and relief.
Caleb is alive.
Clean. Sober.
Mateo nodded weakly.
He looked over at Leo, who was peering out from behind Hazel's large frame, staring at the blood with wide eyes. I banished you because the syndicate was falling apart.
A war was coming.
I thought if you had my money, my protection, you'd become a target. I stripped you of everything so my enemies would think you meant nothing to me.
It was the only way to keep you alive. I
didn't know you'd take my heart with you. Hazel looked down at the ruthless mafia don, seeing at last the broken, desperate man beneath the blood and the bravado, a man who had sacrificed their love to save her life.
"Mommy," Leo whispered, reaching out to touch Mateo's knee. "Is he going to die?"
"No, little bear," Hazel said fiercely, her jaw set in a stubborn line. She grabbed Mateo's suit jacket and hauled him upward with the formidable strength of a woman who hauled 50-pound bags of flour every morning.
"He's too stubborn to die."
Mateo leaned heavily against her lush, sturdy frame, groaning as she helped him to his feet.
"Hazel, come back to me. Let me protect you. Both of you. Listen to me, Matteo Lombardi."
Hazel's voice was steady. She looked him dead in the eyes, no longer the terrified girl he had once banished, but a queen in her own right.
I am not hiding in your mansion. I am not playing your secret mistress. If we walk out of this alive, I am your equal. We do this on my terms, or you never see your son again. Understand?
A slow, bloody smile spread across Mateo's face. He looked at the fierce, beautiful, plus-size woman holding him up, then at the fierce little boy standing at her side.
His family. His empire.
Yes, my queen, Mateo whispered reverently.
Whatever you want. Just let me come home.
The blood spilled in Chicago ultimately paved the road to a fiercely protective love in Maine. Hazel proved that true strength isn't about fitting a mold, it's about commanding respect on your own terms, forcing a ruthless mafia king to finally bend the knee to his queen.
Did you love this intense, emotional conclusion?
Like this video, share it with your fellow romance drama lovers, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling stories. Tell us below, what was your favorite twist?